My name is Michael, and here is the story of how something transformed my life forever. To truly comprehend it, you must first grasp its origins. I met Marie back in high school. We were just great pals back then. We'd sit together occasionally and joke about like teens. However, after graduation, life occurred. We went our separate ways. Fast forward a few years, and I received an unexpected notification on Instagram. It was Marie. She'd liked one of my posts, an old photo of me attending a friend's wedding. I examined her profile, and before I knew it, we were catching up in the direct messages. The talk flowed as if no time had gone. We spoke about everything: work, family, old classmates, and even ridiculous high school rumors. It felt lovely to reconnect with her. A few texts developed into extensive conversations, and we decided to meet up. Just a simple gathering to see one another again. One hangout led to another, then another. We soon began spending time together on a regular basis. There was a natural spark between us, like we just fit. And one day, it simply made sense to name it what it was. We were dating at that moment in my life. Being with Marie felt like the greatest thing that had ever happened to me. She was my person. The person I could talk to about anything. The person who made life seem a little lighter. Looking back, I know how much I believed in us. But, as you'll see, I had no idea what was going on. Marie and I had a solid relationship for the previous 3 years. We felt like we were on the same page most of the time, and I honestly couldn't fathom my life without her. We'd been friends for a long time, but when we reconnected, it felt like everything clicked into place. We spent a lot of time together, so I got to meet her friends. They came to know me too. I joined her circle, and she reciprocated by joining mine. Marie was not a stranger to my friends. She fitted perfectly in. We became a team, and it seemed like a long-term partnership. We both had personal lives outside of the partnership. We have our own jobs, friends, and interests. We did, however, manage to balance everything. Looking back, I see why I never questioned it. When you're caught up in something that feels right, you tend to overlook the minor details that would indicate otherwise. It didn't occur to me that everything may fall apart. Not at that time. I held an entry-level employment at a financial firm. Not exactly glamorous, but it was a decent career with possibilities for advancement. I wasn't working solely for a wage. I had a plan. The goal was straightforward: climb the ladder, secure a higher position, and create a future in which Marie and I will not have to worry about money. Promotions are difficult to come by in the corporate world, but I believed that with enough commitment, I could achieve them. Marie, on the other hand, was doing well but not fully stable. She had a job, but it didn't provide long-term stability. Some months were better than others for her, and I could tell she desired greater financial security. We talked about it a lot. In reality, we reached an arrangement. Once promoted, I would make a proposal. It wasn't only about the ring or the wedding. It was important to ensure that we were financially stable before taking that move. Neither of us wanted to struggle when we could start with something solid. This made sense. But here's the deal. Just because we formed a plan did not mean that life would follow it. The promotion did not arrive when I expected it, and it also did not occur the next time. Delays were occurring, and every time I thought I was getting near, something else pushed it further down the line. Things are absolutely out of my control. Through it all, I thought Marie understood. I even informed her. I realize it's taking longer than we expected, but I assure you I'm working on it. She'd grin and tell me she believed me before we moved on. I had no reason to believe there was a problem, but as I would soon discover, I was completely incorrect. One evening, the rain fell in sheets, hammering against my windshield as I drove home from work. The streets were slick, the traffic was slow, and my mind was already exhausted from a long day. My phone rang just as I was about to pass through a familiar crossroads. It was Marie. Her tone was casual, almost pleasant, when she requested me to pick her up from a friend's house. She reminded me that I would be passing past there anyway, so it wouldn't be a problem. I did not think twice about it. I promised her I'd be there shortly and continued on my way. I arrived a little early than intended. The rain had subsided significantly, so instead of honking or contacting her, I decided to simply walk up to the door and knock. As I drew closer, I could hear loud voices and laughter coming from within. It was not unusual. Marie and her friends were always lively, but the electricity in the room caught my attention. I just wanted to give them a moment before I interrupted. However, through the thin walls, the talk became brutally clear. One of the females, in a lighthearted but curious tone, asked Marie a question. "So, what happens to your wealthy partner when Michael finally proposes?" The room fell silent for a half second before Marie's laughter spilled through. Then she responded, "Oh, I'll brutally dump Michael when he proposes." The instant she said it, the entire room burst out laughing. I stood frozen outside the door. I didn't need to hear anymore. I did not want to. Without knocking, without saying anything, I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove away. I entered my flat, closing the door behind me. The room was dark, but I did not turn on the lights. I did not need to see anything. My clothes clung to my skin, cold and saturated with rain, but I didn't bother changing. I simply strolled to the couch and collapsed into it, staring at nothing. My mind was unraveling every second I'd spent with Marie. She always told me she loved me. Had everything been a lie? My thoughts returned to the rich guy. How long has he been around? Was he a recent addition? Or had he been there since the beginning? Was I merely there for security? She kept someone close just in case. Things with him did not go as expected. The realization made my stomach turn. Had I ever truly been her first choice? Was this why she always kept her phone in airplane mode when she was around me? I'd never questioned it before. She had always made it sound pleasant, saying she wanted to focus on us and avoid distractions. And I'd believed her, but now it was evident. It'd never been about me. It's probably about keeping him hidden. I reached for my phone and turned it off. No calls, no messages, and no explanations. Just silence. She didn't come over that night. Maybe she was upset that I didn't take her up, or she had remained at a friend's apartment. The next morning, I awoke knowing exactly what I was going to do. I went about my business as normal. I prepared for work as if it were any other day. I showered, dressed, got my keys, and went out. I wasn't going to be the guy who hung around moping over someone who had been playing me for who knows how long. Work was the same as usual. Emails, meetings, spreadsheets, things that would typically be stressful. Today, however, they provided a pleasant distraction. The hours passed, and I checked my phone on a regular basis, but the screen remained blank. Marie received no calls or texts. Not a single "Hey, are you okay?" or a simple "Why didn't you pick me up?" She did not appear to mind that I went utterly mute on her, and honestly, I was fine with it. My phone suddenly buzzed. It was not Marie. It was one of her buddies. She sat there, laughing, as Maria made that statement that evening. I had already picked up, knowing that this discussion was not going to end well. The second time I said hi, she arrived heated, her tone full of hostility. "Why are you hurting Marie for no apparent reason?" That was the first thing she said. No greetings. Just get directly to the accusation. As if I were the villain in all of this. I took a big breath and kept my voice calm. But I did not hold back. "No reason," I repeated. "How long have you known Marie has another man?" Silence. That was all I received in response. She wasn't sure what to do with herself. The quiet told me everything. Every single one of them knew they had witnessed me being the loyal lover, treating Marie as if she were the only woman in the world. They laughed behind my back, because they knew the truth. My voice was chilly, controlled, and clear. "You all are lovely to me. But as I previously stated, you were aware that she was cheating. You knew she was going to use me. And none of you said anything." There was nothing left to say. I ended the call. I wasn't interested in seeing her stumble over some ineffective defense. I put my phone down and breathed. I was not foolish. I knew exactly what would happen next. The second the call ended, she planned to run straight to Marie and Marie. I knew everything from the moment she heard it. She panics. I had no doubt that my phone would shortly blow up. But for now, I just sat there, allowing the weight of it all to sink in. Marie didn't spend any time. The first call arrived within minutes of me hanging up with her friend. Then another. And another. Every time my phone vibrated, I already knew it was her. She didn't wait a full minute before attempting again. It was unrelenting. One missed call stacks on top of the last. When she noticed I wasn't responding, the text messages began to pour in, one after the other, appearing so quickly that I hardly had time to read them before another one replaced them. "Michael, please allow me to explain. It's not as you think. I swear, the guy is my ex. I have nothing to do with him anymore." She was trying to say anything to get me to listen. But I didn't have to. I'd already heard everything that mattered. I wasn't perplexed. There was no missing context that might alter what she said or intended. I just sat there, staring at my phone, as the text continued to arrive. I wasn't going to allow her smooth talk her way out of this. So I did not respond. I did not call back. I didn't bother to block her. I wanted her to feel the weight of stillness. That evening, I was at home, attempting to unwind from a tough day at work. One had hardly taken off my shoes before settling into my couch. The sound of the intercom buzzing broke through the silence of my apartment. At first, I just stared at it, knowing exactly who it was. I let it ring for a few more seconds, considering whether to respond. But curiosity got the best of me, and I eventually got up and hit the button to view the feed. And there she was, Marie, on the blurry intercom. I could see desperation on her face. Then her voice broke through, urgent and shaking. "Michael, please open the door. Let me talk to you." She hammered on the door, her voice breaking in mid-sentence. I didn't say anything, I just watched. She was crying and wiping her cheeks with the sleeves of her jacket. Her breath hitched in between sentences. "Please. I swear I am not with him. It was only a joke. I love you." Her voice was harsh, like if she had been crying long before she arrived. But it didn't move me. I touched the button and spoke in a calm, authoritative tone. "Go be with him. I'm not going to propose. I am not marrying you." There was quiet, a long, agonizing gap in which she simply stood there, staring at the intercom as if she had not heard me. Then she let out a choking sob and began begging again. She pleaded. She swore on everything she could think of. But I refused to budge. I'd spent years loving and trusting her. And in one reckless moment, she broke everything. She remained there for hours, alternately knocking, crying, and whispering my name into the intercom. But she must have sensed that I was not going to give in. Her voice grew weaker, her knocks less frequent, and she was gone. I did not watch her leave. I did not need to. I just sat back down and listened to the silence she had left behind. I never contacted Marie again. There was nothing more to say. She made her decisions. And I made mine. I envisioned her having to explain to her parents why the guy they had known for years, who they most likely assumed would be their future son-in-law, had suddenly departed from her life. What could she possibly tell them? That she got caught giggling about how she intended to use and discard me. That she had another man on standby, while I was out here working hard to establish a future with her. No matter how she spun it, there was no version of the narrative that would make her appear good in either situation. It was not my problem. She had to deal with her own issue now. Actions have consequences. And, for once, she couldn't talk or cry her way out of it. I will not lie. This entire incident messed me up for a time. You spend years with someone, thinking you're creating something real, only to discover they didn't see it the same way. It's a difficult pill to swallow, but I've had time to reflect. And I've learned a few lessons from this experience, which I hope others might benefit from. First, if you truly love someone, pay attention to how they behave when they believe you are not listening. When people are looking for information, it is simple to believe what they say. You in the eye, the kind words, smiles, and I love yous make it simple to feel reassured. But when you're not present, they assume you're not paying attention. That's when the truth emerges. That's when you realize who they truly are. If I hadn't overheard the talk, I'd have proposed to Marie. I had no idea what was going on. I would have gone into that situation believing she was as committed to me as I was to her. However, reality is unaffected by emotions, and the truth will always emerge. Second, commitment and honesty are more important than time devoted. A connection is not valuable simply because it has been in existence for many years. 3 years with the wrong person will not miraculously change them into the correct one. It doesn't matter how long you've been together. It's all about how strong the foundation is. And if that foundation is based on dishonesty, selfishness, or hidden ambitions, it is only a matter of time until it crumbles. I used to believe that, because Marie and I had history, it meant something significant. But when commitment and honesty are absent, time is meaningless. Finally, if someone does not value your efforts, they do not deserve your loyalty. I worked hard. I wasn't wealthy, but I was doing my best to provide a future for both of us. I had a plan. I was ambitious, and I was willing to make sacrifices to provide us with a solid life. None of this mattered to Marie. She wanted more. Instead of being honest with me, she played along until she was able to switch to the better alternative. But love does not entail waiting for something greater to come along. It's about standing by someone you believe in and maturing together. If they don't realize your worth now, they never will. So, if you're watching this and are in a relationship, pay attention not to what they say when they look you in the eye, but to how they move when they believe no one is watching. And if you ever find yourself in a position where your love and commitment are taken for granted, leave. Because, believe me, remaining will cost you more in the end. Now I want to hear your thoughts. Here's the next story. He sat quietly on the porch, the ancient rocker creaking softly beneath him, waiting in the dark. The cabin's lights were turned off, and he had also disabled the automated yard lights. The night was crisp and clear, with the first whisper of fall, and a pleasant breeze blowing down the mountainside. Patience came naturally to him. He was content to sit for as long as necessary, His glance swept the forest edge, never remaining in one spot for long. His peripheral vision would catch any movement, anything out of place. The moon hung high, its pale radiance casting sharp shadows on the tree line and the scattered bushes that had developed since his previous clearing. He knew something was out there, watching and stalking. He could feel it, an itch between his shoulder blades and a little prickle on his skin. His weapon rested against his legs, a steady, comfortable weight beneath his fingers. It was simply a matter of time. An hour passed, and then another, before he noticed movement to his left. He didn't turn his head, instead using his scanning look to check what his senses had already warned him about. The moon had shifted, lengthening the shadows, but the form he was tracking stuck out, softer, rounder, and moving with a deliberate slowness. Now he could see it, a lighter figure against the darkness, approaching and aligning itself to strike the north side of the cabin. He raised the gun slowly, but solidly against his shoulder, the sling taut over his supporting arm. His eye caught the scope as he turned on the night vision. The world takes on a phosphorescent green radiance. Slow exhale, steady inhalation. Half a breath, released and held. His finger caressed the trigger. The shot shattered almost effortlessly. The recoil was barely more than a forceful shove. Yet after hours of calm, the sound was startling. He remained with the rifle, immediately acquiring his target in case a follow-up shot was required, which it wasn't. The monster struggled briefly before stilling. He paused for a time before groaning and rising from the rocker to step off the porch. He rolled the fallen body over a mountain lion from 30 yards away. Beautiful, yet risky. He shakes his head. Regretful, but not sorry. Life on the mountain was harsh, and he could not afford to lose his hands as winter approached. He slung his rifle over his shoulders. He crouched and wedged his arms beneath the animal's body, muscle straining as he lifted the 70-pound weight and carried it to the steel cage beside the cabin. He placed it on an old blanket for padding, clutching a little flashlight between his teeth. He delicately removed the tranquilizer dart from its fur, taking care not to cause any further harm. The barbed point had done its job, keeping the sedative in place long enough to take action. After securing the cage, he returned inside, unloaded the rifle, and repaired the barrel before storing it beside its more lethal counterparts. Sleep would be limited tomorrow. But this was nothing new. Not bothered to undress, he kicked his boots off, unbuckled his revolver holster, and placed it on the nightstand. He lay back, closed his eyes, and fell asleep within seconds. The morning sun shining through the cabin window awoke him, like it did every day. He grumbled and pushed himself up from the comfortable mattress. His body protested the movement. Mornings had never been easy for him, not in years. Years of wear, injuries, and hard living had reduced them to a ritual of stiff joints, aching bones, and hurting muscles. He removed his shirt and ran a medicated cloth over his skin before applying the aloe lotion he purchased on his monthly supply run to town. He applied it equally over his chest, left arm, jaw, neck, and as much of his back as he could reach. Skipping this step meant paying for it later. An outsider would observe a towering, solidly muscular man with weathered tent skin. His long beard was peppered with gray and salt and pepper hair, which extended past his shoulders, giving him a tough aspect. But as he removed his shirt, the scars revealed a different story. The burns on his chest and arm appeared to have melted, reformed, and solidified in waves. An aggressive mix of red, purple, and pale ridges, shirtless. The scars overshadowed everything, including the fact that he had once been a handsome guy beneath the beard. He never let anyone see. Once he had completed his regimen, he started the coffee pot and put on a clean, long-sleeved shirt, followed by a light jacket to keep warm in the morning chill. His boots slipped on with habitual ease, and he secured his pistol around his waist with a familiar flick of the strap. The final touch was fastening his badge to his jacket pocket. The dazzling gold contrasted with the rich green of his park ranger suit. After filling his thermos, he grabbed his damaged straw hat, locked the cabin, and started his truck. He left it idle while scanning his surroundings. The cabin was 30 miles from the nearest town, accessible exclusively via a single winding dirt road. A 50-yard fire break surrounded the property, and beyond it, the dense forest stood like an impassable wall. The only sound out here was the deep rumbling of the truck motor, which was just what he enjoyed. The cottage itself began as a kit build, but a decade later it stood strong and substantial. It was designed to last another 100 years. Its steep frame roof was fitted with solar panels, with windmills at either end of the top. The windmills also provided backup electricity for the pumps. However, he kept a manual pump as a backup. A septic system handled trash, and a heating oil tank kept him warm when the Franklin stove's woodpile ran low. Even the chicken coop had heaters installed for the winter. A second structure stood nearby, large enough to accommodate his truck, a 6-seat snowcat, and 2 snowmobiles along the garage's back wall. Sat has 2 fuel tanks, one for heating oil and the other for 1.00 gallons of gasoline. He made a mental note to replenish them before the snowfall began. Better safe than sorry. Yet today's assignment was unavoidable. He was on his way to the main ranger station to drop off the mountain lion he'd captured the night before. He despised doing it, but leaving the cat to fend for itself would be disastrous. Come spring, hikers and campers walked into the wilderness without a clue. People stated they came to explore nature, but most wanted to take nice images and get a flavor of the environment without the danger. His job was to preserve the property and its guests, 2 items that did not always match. With a sigh, he put the truck in drive and pulled up to the porch, where the large cat was lying unconscious. The lion in cage weighed over 100 pounds, yet he easily put it onto the truck's tailgate and secured it. Going into town was his least favorite aspect of the job. He didn't like people in general, and he especially disliked crowds. He had chosen this life because of the solitude and distance it provided from the rest of the world he had left behind. The ranger station was on the outskirts of town, a gorgeous structure created by a great architect whose name he never remembered. His first destination was out back, where the animal enclosures were situated. He'd drop off the mountain lion, complete the paperwork, and notify the vet that she had a new patient. Then, maybe, he could return to the stillness. The animal quarters were modest but well maintained, with 10-foot chain link enclosures and small doghouses for shelter. They had running water, even though they were only intended for brief stays. The staff ensured their cleanliness and comfort. On one end, a sliding hatch connected to the ranger's transport cages. All Harrison had to do was attach the cage, open both doors and allow the animal to wake up and leave on its own. There is no need to handle it directly within the ranger station. Everything was modern and clean. The room was illuminated with bright fluorescent lights. As soon as Harrison stepped inside, he scowled. That type of illumination often gave him headaches, something about the harm to his eyes. Years ago, he rushed through the papers before heading to the veterinarian's office. When he saw Whitney was there this week, he smiled briefly. The vets came and went, some kinder than others. But he really liked Whitney. She was polite without feeling compelled to fill every pause with small talk. In addition, she was attractive. Morning, Harrison. She greeted him with a warm grin as he stepped in, tipping his hat and placing it on the counter. She was the only one who nicknamed him Harrison. Everyone else insisted on calling him Harry, a nickname he detested. More than 2 decades ago, his mother was the last person to address him as Harrison. He offered a quick nod and leaned over the counter to retrieve the clipboard. He took out his pen and began filling out the necessary official documents to release a protected species. Number 10. Whitney inquired, already moving towards the back door that leads to the pens. Harrison looked up, gave another brief nod, and returned to his paperwork. Whitney paused for a time, watching him. He captivated her every time he descended from the highlands. She found herself wanting to know more about his past, what had made him so closed off beneath the beard and long hair. He was a handsome man, muscular and rugged in a way that made her feel something deep inside. His broad shoulders, thick arms, and strong hands suggested a lifetime of hard work. She'd always been curious about the long sleeves, even in the height of summer. She imagined intricate tattoos underneath. But he never showed anyone. Finding someone who matched her strength without attitude was uncommon. She had spent years developing her body, taking pride in her strength, and she expected the same from others. Harrison's serene assurance and demeanor drew her in with a hushed sigh. She took one more look at him before heading out to check on the mountain lion. The big cats were sneaking back into the region, along with all the tourists. It was a problem. She had a feeling this wasn't going to be the last one she had to deal with before winter. Harrison finished his paperwork and briefly glanced at the door Whitney had passed through. He wanted to follow and observe her work, but old habits were difficult to overcome with a shake of his head. He turned and walked out the same way he had entered, because he was already in town. He planned to stock up on supplies as the snow fell. He could be stuck in the mountains for several months at a time. Not that he minded. Being paid to stay at home was hardly the worst thing in the world. Unless there was an emergency, he would be alone. He went to the bank to get cash, then stopped by the feed store and general store. 250-pound bags of poultry feed, 2 bags of rock salt, 100 pounds of flour, cases of beans, mixed vegetables, and a few boxes of his favorite ramen went onto the truck. Then he gathered oil spark plugs and spare tracks for his snowmobiles, in case he needed to go out in the thick of winter. His final destination was his favorite store in town, Bob Firearms. Bob, the proprietor, was a chatty old man who enjoyed gossip almost as much as he did selling guns. He kept up a continuous stream of conversation as Harrison perused. Harrison rarely said anything back, but it didn't seem to matter. Many people are in town to watch the leaves turn color. Bob, the shop owner, shook his head, amused. I'm not sure what draws them. Perhaps they hack down all their trees to create malls or something. They're all dressed as if it's cold outside. Bob continued. Scarves and mittens. Half of them still have their tags on. Harrison grabbed in a 5B tin of powder, 3 packs of primers, 2 for his pistols, 1 for his point, 4,440, and a new skinning knife, as his old one was virtually worn to nothing. Something caught his attention as he looked at the cupboard near the register. A revolver he had never seen before. Bob understood what he meant when he pointed to it with a questioning look. The old man took it out and placed it on a soft mat in the glass case. Harrison grabbed it up and turned it over, hoping to discover what he was looking for. It was a 3-screw Blackhawk, and the feel of the hammer indicated that it had not been tampered with. He assumed it would be difficult to find one of these. Using his flashlight to study the barrel's rifling, Bob grinned. Do you have an eye for the good ones? I see Ruger hasn't been used much. Probably not even a full box of bullets through it. And it hasn't been lawyered up. Damn pity they converted all those ancient single actions because one idiot shot himself. Some people were wise and ignored the recall. So this one still runs as smoothly as butter. I purchased it at an estate auction this spring. Harrison ignored Bob's ranting, but he did not put the pistol away. The old man was correct. It was in fantastic condition. The so-called safety conversion was a response to a lawsuit. Some fool had a fully loaded 6-shot revolver, dropped it, and it went off. The change avoided this, but it made the action feel rough and clunky. The pre-conversion models were smooth as silk and much sought for. Finally, he put the gun down but not back on the mat. Instead, he put it on top of his pile of purchases. It appeared that he had recently discovered a new winter activity to accompany it. He added a case of 357 rounds before giving Bob a lazy salute and heading for the door. Come back at any time. Ranger Bob called after him, pounding the counter and smiling. Nobody else is as conversational and pleasant as you. Harrison smirked but did not glance back. His errands were mostly completed, with the exception of scheduling a fuel delivery for his cabin. He parked his pickup in front of the gun store and strolled down the block to Mom's Diner. It was a tiny, tourist-friendly establishment designed to resemble a 1950s restaurant. The decor was a touch tacky, but the owner, Janet, was an excellent cook. Inside the brush, steel and red vinyl furniture created a malt store atmosphere. A dozen people sat in small groups, conversing about breakfast. The counter was unoccupied, so Harrison took a seat and placed his hat on the stool beside him. Lucy, the waitress, walked up with a knowing smile. Waffles, bacon, wheat toast. What about orange juice? She asked. He claimed it was the most he had talked in days, and his voice sounded gruff, like an old barn door rusted on its hinges. Lucy lifted an eyebrow and studied him. She had a habit of creating backstories for her clientele. This one was on the run. The couple was creeping around. Harrison considered the hermit in the corner to be a secret millionaire. She pictured an 80-year-old time trapper coming down from the mountains once a year to sell his pelts, get drunk, and go to a brothels. In her mind, she pictured him clad in furs with a gun propped against the counter. His pack mules were tethered up outside. She was about to ask how many pelts he brought this time, but the thought made her chuckle to herself. Harrison spotted her studying him, but it didn't appear that she was measuring him up for anything. She wasn't flirting or trying to chat him up. Whatever she was thinking, he didn't care as he sipped his coffee and waited for his meal. Old memories slipped in. Another reason he tried to avoid town whenever possible. Being with others always brought the past too close for comfort. This cafe reminded him of a small bistro on California's coast. Morro Bay. His last genuine romance ended nearly a decade ago. He had recently returned from Afghanistan, on leave after a lengthy mission. He had called his fiancée, Margot Al-Sun, to tell her he was returning. She had stated she couldn't get away for an hour, and that we could meet at the Bayside Cafe for lunch. He arrived early, took a booth, and sipped iced tea while waiting. She had driven into the parking lot in a cloud of dust, her small convertible coming to a halt. Same as usual. She drove too quickly. Always had. Harrison smiled as he watched her approach. She was beautiful, thin, and elegant. Her raven black hair shone in the light as she removed the scarf that protected it from the wind. She smiled and waved at him as she walked into the diner. Harrison waved a hand when she saw him in the back corner, where she anticipated to find him, and smiled broadly as she strode through the area and sank into the bench across from him. That was the first sign he knew. He had been gone for 10 months, without even a kiss. "Hello, Harry. I'm pleased you're back safe and sound," she said. "I realize I didn't write as much as I should have. But there's a reason for that. I wanted to have this conversation face to face." She paused and sipped from her glass of water. Her eyes met someone else instead of his. "Harry, he is a stockbroker. A lovely man who does not go around pretending to be a soldier and attempting to kill others." His profession had always been a source of dispute between them, but he believed they had reached an impasse. Agreeing to disagree, clearly. He was wrong. He sat down and watched her for a bit. His face is expressionless. He'd known for a long time that he didn't love her. In any case, not in the way that stories are told. But he loved her, and would have happily spent his life with her. Her memories of their time together were the one bright spot in a succession of bleak deployments, fighting for something no one could see, in an unwinnable war. Meanwhile, she had screwed someone else. Wasn't that special? He could feel his rage building just beneath the surface, the wrath that looked to be only a heartbeat away from bursting out. Harrison closed his eyes and counted 10. Then again, when he opened them, she looked at him like he had two heads. "Are you not listening to me, Harry?" she asked, agitated. "I heard you. Margot. You found someone else to screw while I was gone. I got it. Now, if you'll excuse me," he growled before standing up and walking away, leaving her there with her mouth open. "Harry, Harry, don't walk away from me," she shouted out behind him, but he didn't give a damn. Harrison shook his head, attempting to remove the memory. He had left the diner, spent the next week so intoxicated that everything was a fog, and when he had sobered up, he signed an early leave agreement and volunteered for the following deployment. He reflected that this was not his most dazzling moment. When he finished his lunch, he left enough money on his plate to cover the bill, plus a hefty tip. He walked out with his hat on. The sound of his boots on the linoleum seemed to resonate weirdly in his mind. Driving back out of town, another recollection surfaced. This Oregon town wasn't much like his hometown, but there were enough similarities that the street he was on could easily have gone to his childhood house. Another departure. Another heartache, albeit of a different type. This time, he was only 19 years old when he took emergency leave to return to the place where he was raised. The chaplain had contacted him, holding a Red Cross telegram. There was a fire at his boyhood house. His parents and younger brother did not make it out. The army, as awful as it was at many things, did one thing right every time: compassionate leave. When a family member was slain, they would pull out all the stops to get the soldier on the next available transport. With orders and advance pay in hand, he had taken a taxi from the airport and was riding down a tree-lined residential street, similar to the one he was on now. When the cab turned onto his street, he could see the burned-out shell of his parents' house at the top of the cul-de-sac, as well as a line of yellow tape around the front of the property to keep spectators away. The home was unrecognizable. A pile of burnt remnants, including a few bones, rose to the gloomy sky. The chimney was the only element that remained standing, virtually unscathed save for the soot. He requested the cab driver to wait as he stepped out and stood on the sidewalk. I'm not sure why he came, but he knew he had to see it. It was not like he could do anything right now. There was nothing to salvage, and the bodies had long vanished. He still remained there, staring. A million memories compete for time behind his eyes. He wasn't sure how long he stood there, but when he got back in the cab, he had to wake up the driver, who had been sleeping behind the wheel, and ask for the nearest motel. Back in the present, Harrison had left the town and was soon back in the forest, pulling off on the long dirt road that would lead him to the sanctuary, as the only reprieve from the memories that threatened to overtake him. It was the one location he had discovered where he could sleep without nightmares. When he turned onto the final dogleg up the mountain before his cabin, he felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He slowed the truck, creeping along as he studied the sensation, his eyes seeking for what his subconscious already knew. There were tire tracks on the road that he had not made. Someone unfamiliar with the road had gotten too close to the edge, and he could see how the grasses had broken down along the soft shoulder. Harrison has lived here for years and knew every inch of that road. He knew how easy it was to become stranded along the shoulder when it rained, even when it was dry. He was careful to stay on the higher ground, closer to the slope. He came to a stop just before the clearing and reached into the glove box for a pair of binoculars. He scanned the trees, seeing his cabin through the many tree trunks, seeking for movement or anything out of place. A truck, a ranger vehicle, was parked beside the cottage. Harrison took a deep breath, stowed the binoculars, and released the brake. Why? Someone from the station would be up here, even though he had just been down there this morning. You did not know. Come to think of it. You still have his radio. Harrison looked down and smiled. He had not switched it on. He had already been stopped 3 times this year for failing to follow protocol and driving into the clearing with his radio switched off. He wasn't sure whether to be pleased or concerned. Whitney, the veteran, sat in his rocking rocker on the front porch. He turned his truck and backed it up to the porch to make unloading simpler before shutting it down. "Hey, Harrison," Whitney replied, moving from her chair with self-consciousness. Harrison nodded at Whitney and waited patiently. He assumed she would tell him why she was here in her own good time. Whitney shuffled her feet uneasily while looking down at him. Then she bent down and picked up a satchel sitting next to the chair. "You got some mail," she remarked, holding out the handbag. Harrison simply nodded, not speaking. "I figured I'd bring it to you," she said, then paused. "That you don't often go down to the station." Her cheeks reddened. "Damn. Okay. That is not correct. It is basically rubbish. But I wanted to see where you lived." Her gaze did not meet his. But if they had, they could have noticed the corner of his mouth quirk, as if amused. "Coffee?" Harrison inquired, nodding toward the entrance. Whitney smiled as she said, "I would love some." She couldn't explain how she knew, but she was convinced he wasn't unhappy with her for showing up. In fact, if pressed, she would admit that he was grateful for the companionship. Harrison unlocked the door and gestured for her to enter. He grabbed an armful of things and followed her, setting his packages down by the door before heading to the kitchen. Making a pot of coffee to brew, he made 4 more trips to the vehicle, leaving the feed and the rock salt on the porch before stacking his purchases inside the house and hanging his hat and jacket on a hook near the door. He looked around to see Whitney making a slow lap of the living room, her gaze taking in everything. He shook his head, curious what was on her mind. She'd get to the point when she was prepared. He guessed. He returned to pour coffee into 2 mugs and joined her in the living room, offering her one of the mugs with a curious tilt of his head. "It's fine. Thank you," Whitney replied, not bothering to wonder how she knew that was the question on his mind. Harrison's home featured a relatively simple floor plan. On this floor, there was primarily open space. Only the bathroom and bedroom were behind closed doors. The kitchen and living area were combined into one large space. Only the transition from tile in the kitchen to hardwood elsewhere distinguishes the space. There was a ladder in one corner that led up to a loft area for storage and down into the basement, where he kept his reloading bench and weights. Along the wall where the bedroom was located, there was additional storage. There weren't many decorations, however. He had grown wild hair a few years earlier and put a dozen photos on one wall. There were images of his parents and sibling, as well as shots from half a dozen military deployments. The rest of the walls were devoid of ornamentation, although there were tools, a rifle rack, snowshoes, and other trinkets hanging here and there. Whitney finished her circle of the room, sipping her coffee quietly, and returned to her position in front of the images. She examined each one, sneaking sideways glances at Harrison, who was sitting in a recliner near the cast-iron stove. When she turned to face him again, he waved a hand at the couch, inviting her to sit and tell him what she wanted, why she actually came. Whitney groaned and sat down, her gaze fixed on Harrison. "I know I shouldn't have come here uninvited," she said, shaking her head. "The trouble is, you don't say much. And when I question the other rangers about you, they just shrug. No one seems to know you down there. They all agree that you are a terrific man to have on their side when things go tough. And no one knows the mountain better than you do. Beyond that, you are also a mystery to them. I was curious." She hesitated for a time, her eyes unfocused, and shivered slightly. "May I tell you a story? I'm not sure why, but I think you should know. I'm very confident you won't tell anyone," she said with a tense grin. Harrison simply nodded, the corner of his mouth moving again. "She began when I was just out of college and working at this clinic in the middle of nowhere. They dealt primarily with cattle and horses, with a few pets thrown in. It was my ideal job. I adore large animals. We received a call about a lame horse, a show horse scheduled to compete in another week, and they were anxious. The other vet was out, so it was just me and the receptionist. So I offered to go and look. The ranch was about 50 miles away, with dirt roads similar to yours. And I drove my Bronco fully laden with everything I thought I may need. It turned out to be only a bruised hoof. And I was back on the road within an hour." She paused to take a big breath. "That was when things began to go wrong. The Bronco broke down halfway back to town, overheating and refusing to start even after cooling down. There was no cell phone coverage, and my CB radio only received static signals. So I gave up and began walking. I had traveled around 10 miles and was really sore. Back then, I was a scrawny little thing. In college, I referred to my weekly game of tennis as exercise, and weighed about 120 pounds. A truck drove along, and I waved it down, asked for a ride into town. He's the one driving it. Nobody I'd ever seen before gave me a creepy vibe, but my feet hurt, and it was at least another 15 miles. So I disregarded it and climbed in. He pulled over a few miles farther down the road and demanded payment for the ride. When I informed him I didn't have any money, she stopped. Tears streamed down her face, and her breath was quick and rapid. It took several minutes before she regained control. She proceeded to scrub her cheeks with the back of her palm. He said he was not talking about money and attacked me. He hit me hard for the next few hours. When he eventually left, I was severely injured. 2 black eyes, a fractured wrist, and a broken nose. I don't remember much from the next day, but I did make it back to town. I am shaken and terrified. A local woman noticed me. They wrapped me in a blanket and summoned the cops. She was silent for a long time. Harrison brought her a fresh cup of coffee and some napkins for blowing her nose, then waited. They never located him. Despite her desperation to get this out, I spent the following few years afraid that he'd locate me again. I left the practice and moved in with my parents. Visited a therapist. Nothing seemed to relieve the nightmares. I learned how to sleep well while in physical therapy. If I worked hard enough and was exhausted, I would simply collapse at the end of the day. It became a cycle, and I was killing myself. I was down to less than 90 pounds and vomiting blood when a lady who honestly terrified the crap out of me approached me one day. She was a bodybuilder, and she told me about her violent ex and how a need to defend herself drove her to become stronger. The more she talked, the more I recognized myself and wanted to be like her. Strong, independent, and powerful. It's been over 10 years, and while I've never been competitive, I still like the rush of endorphins and the boost of confidence it provides. Most men are hellish. Most individuals of all genders stare at me as if I'm a freak, but you never have. You come into the office a few times a year and have always treated me as a person. I never noticed the disgust or dread in your eyes that I saw in the rest of them. You are a huge man who is strong and independent, something I found appealing. I suppose that is why I came, she added quietly. I wanted to learn more about you. Harrison sat silently, reflecting on her story and studying her expression. He could tell she was hurt. Reliving such experiences took a toll on her body, although she appeared less tight now. I'm relieved to have told someone else, shared the weight. Do you want to stay for dinner? He inquired gently. Whitney's head snapped up, and her eyes widened. In the 3 years she had known him, she had only heard him pronounce her name. His voice was raspy and hoarse, and she could tell he didn't communicate much with anyone, including her. Whitney smiled sheepishly at the ranger. The afternoon was spent in calm companionship. Neither of them spoke anything as she helped him store his items and followed him. She helped where she could as he did some duties around the house. When the sun began to drop, she accompanied him into the kitchen, where she sat on a stool and watched him gather items for a meal. That night's dinner featured chicken breast butterflied and sautéed with garlic and onions, baked potato with a side salad. Harrison filled a pair of chili mugs with apple cider from an earthenware jug in the refrigerator. Whitney continued to be interested as she observed him. After hours together, she was astonished to find herself comfortable and enjoying her time. She felt at ease here with this man for the first time since her ordeal so long ago. She wondered if he would allow her to return, as he appeared to like her stay as well. After dinner, Harrison surprised her by opening a bottle of wine and removing a pair of dusty wine glasses from the back of the cupboard. He washed the glasses, filled them halfway, and offered one to her without asking. They went out to the porch. Harrison sat in the rocker, with Whitney on a tiny seat next to him, watching the sun set behind the trees. In the dark, the road becomes difficult to navigate. You are welcome to stay, Harrison murmured, not looking at her, his gaze fixed on the tree line. Whitney questioned if he meant that as an invitation to his bed, or simply an invitation to sleep on the couch. She wasn't sure which one she was hoping for. She was fascinated by the muscular, silent man, but she wished he was more chatty. She grinned at the concept and simply nodded. When the wine was finished, Harrison returned inside, put away a few last things, and retired to his bedroom. Returning with a pair of sweatpants and a thick robe, he held them out to Whitney and asked which she preferred. Whitney chose the sweatpants, and when Harrison nodded toward the bathroom, She took it as an invitation to take a shower first. Beneath the sink, she discovered half a dozen unopened toothbrushes and fresh towels. Harrison waited until she had entered the restroom and closed the door before heading down to the basement. He had some extra blankets and a pillow that he had purchased, but found too soft for his liking. He assumed she would prefer to stay on the couch, but he was planning to offer her the room while taking the couch for himself. He located them on a shelf, still wrapped in plastic, and arranged them on the couch. When Whitney finished showering, when she emerged from the bathroom, nearly glowing from the hot shower with her hair still damp, Harrison felt a stirring. She was an extremely lovely woman, and he hadn't felt this strong desire in a long time. He motioned toward the bedroom and shook his head when he noticed her eyes widening. "Sorry. I am not used to speak much. You take the bed. I will take the couch." Whitney looked thoughtful for a while before straightening her shoulders, as if she had made a choice. "Harrison. She stopped before starting again. "I am not ready for anything other than sleeping. But there's enough room on that bed for two of us. And I suppose I'd want to feel someone sleeping next to me." She blushed furiously and refused to look away. Harrison considered it for a time and discovered that he liked the idea much more than he had expected. He gave Whitney a nod and a smile. Whitney could not help but grin when she saw him smile. A genuine smile. It made him appear softer, more friendly. Harrison struggled to fall asleep that night. Whitney seemed to fall asleep as soon as her head hit the pillow. The warmth of another body next to his. The aroma of shampoo blended with her natural scent. Everything came together to give him the granddad of all erections. He made sure he was sleeping on his side with his back to Whitney before falling asleep when Whitney awoke in the morning. Unremembered but pleasant dreams faded as she opened her eyes. She was shocked, but not alarmed, to feel a muscular arm wrapped over her. During the night, Harrison rolled up behind her, spooning with her and cuddling her. She found it both comfortable and exhilarating, and chose to stay in his arms until he awoke. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the window, softly awakening Harrison, as they always did. He found himself close to Whitney, his arm over her. Ashamed and worried how she would react, he slowly began to back away. "It's okay, Harrison. It's kind of nice," Whitney muttered, pressing her hand against his arm to keep it there. He relaxed, taking a long breath, and her presence made him grin. Eventually, the morning routine summoned them to rise. Harrison first, then Whitney. While he used the restroom, she made a pot of coffee. When she was finished, he looked through the fridge and decided on breakfast. They sat in comfortable stillness, enjoying each other's company. After eating, they did the dishes together. Harrison washing, Whitney drying. Whitney replied, "I'd like to come back up here and see you again." As she finished putting away the last dish, she scrubbed the counter and avoided his sight while waiting for his reaction. "I'd enjoy that," Harrison responded, his voice tinged with emotion. "I'd like it very much." Whitney felt a faint pleasure hearing her name said so warmly, and she reprimanded herself for acting like a schoolgirl. When she turned to look at him, she discovered him observing her with brilliant eyes and a grin on his face. She tilted her head, curious what he was thinking. "I'm not a social person these days. Too much baggage. Too many memories." Harrison trailed off, appearing puzzled. "But I couldn't help but think that, as much as I adore this location, it may be even better with another person here. I am with you here." Whitney struggled to hold back a giggle when she watched him blush. She never dreamed he could do such a thing. "Is this so?" Whitney inquired, glancing up at him. His eyes seemed to lure her in, and she felt a rush of excitement. She took a step forward, getting near enough to almost touch but not quite. She got up on her toes and gently kissed him on the cheek. "I'll bring your sweatpants back when I arrive. Maybe I should change my clothes," she replied with a smile. After Whitney left, Harrison kept himself occupied with tasks. But his focus was not on the work. He removed the insulated panels from the garage and installed them around the chicken coop before inspecting the snowcat to ensure everything was in working order. Then he went over both snowmobiles. One was a rapid single-seater designed for amusement, while the other was a more dependable two-seater with a trailer capable of hauling wood or even a person if needed. Following a brief lunch, he sharpened his old scythe. It was probably 100 years old, yet he found it relaxing to use it to clean the overgrown regions surrounding his cabin. The repetitive slicing of the blade through grass and trees gave him a sense of security, a habit he had developed while in the military. Keeping a clean line of sight ensured that no one could sneak up on the cabin. Most significantly, it acted as a firebreak. Forest fires were his greatest dread, and this clearing could one day save his home, or even his life. Thinking about fire always triggered recollections. He attempted to bury his final assignment, His final deployment. They had raided a complex before early, with more than 200 men. However, something went terribly wrong. Either the timing was off, or someone made a bad error, because a gasoline air bomb was dropped directly on top of them. Only 17 out of 22 men survived. Harrison was one of them. His unit was assigned to investigate a potential escape passage, and ended up just outside the blast zone. He remembered the stench of burning flesh, the screams, his own squats. He had survived, albeit with burns on more than 30% of his body. It took him 2 years to rehabilitate before he could retire. Fire attracted him, but also worried him. As he worked, he removed his shirt, exposing himself to the warm October sun. The cool breeze attempted to perspire on his skin. He was almost done. The arms and shoulders ache in a pleasurable way. He heard a truck approaching. His heart lurched without thought. He dashed into the cabin, grabbing his shirt from the railing and hurriedly pulling it on. His hands fumbled with the buttons as the truck entered the clearing. Whitney parked and frowned. She'd seen him through the trees, running for the home. Now he stood there, sweating, his shirt buttoned incorrectly, like if he had just seen a ghost. She stepped out of the truck and gave him a faint, timid grin. "Hello, Harrison. I cleaned your sweatpants and got some groceries for dinner. I hope that is okay." She sounded unsure, as if she was terrified he would reject her. "I need to shower before dinner," he murmured, nodding at the trees. "I've spent the entire afternoon removing brush." Whitney relaxed slightly. He seemed pleased to see her, even smiling slightly. "I know where the kitchen is," she replied with a grin. "You take a shower, I'll cook tonight." Harrison exhaled, relieved, and grabbed some clean clothes before entering the restroom. He liked Whitney a lot, but he was not prepared for this. Not yet. He wasn't prepared for her to ask the questions. He was prepared for the look of terror that would eventually appear. Maybe, but not yet. Whitney went around the kitchen, singing to herself as she arranged the steaks and salad items. She felt nearly ecstatic, like a teen on a first date, and couldn't stop smiling. Taking the initial step had been the correct decision. She was certain of it. Harrison never would have. Yesterday had been fantastic. And waking up in his arms this morning had been thrilling. Harrison stepped out of the shower, fully dressed, to the lovely aroma of dinner cooking. He took a seat at the counter and observed Whitney's serene assurance as she worked in the kitchen. He had to grin when she turned and brought him a fresh cup of coffee without saying anything. Dinner was simple and lovely, just like the night before. After that, they sat on the porch and drank wine. Harrison made a mental point of getting another rocking chair. If Whitney planned to spend more time here. When she refused his chair, he laid a folded blanket on the small bench to ensure her comfort. Whitney thought the gesture was wonderful and offered. His rocker was nice, but ensuring she had something comfortable to sit on while she sipped her wine and watched the stars come out was even more attentive. She understood why Harrison adored this place. It was quite serene. There is no traffic, loud neighbors, or city noise, only the sounds of crickets and night birds. With a starry sky above them. "Can you stay?" Harrison finally asked. His face is scarcely discernible in the dark. "Of course," she replied. Just like last night. Harrison only nodded and returned his gaze to the sky. By sunrise, they were much closer than the night before. Whitney rested contentedly covered in silk pajamas. Harrison's arm lying protectively over her. His palm on her shoulder even as she slept. His fingertips traced delicate patterns on her flesh, causing her to shiver. She hadn't felt this comfortable or connected in a long time. When the sunshine woke Harrison, he realized he was still holding her and began to pull away. He felt Whitney's hand gently hold his in place. They lay there for a time, not speaking, just being in the silence. Harrison eventually got up and started his morning ritual. When he returned, Whitney remained in bed. The cover was drawn up under her arms, and her countenance indicated uncertainty alongside the bed. Her pajamas were folded neatly. "Harrison," she said quietly, "I realize I'm not the most attractive female I know. I have too many muscles, yet I am still a woman." Her voice trembled, and she seemed near to tears. Harrison took a step forward, torn between want and hesitation, between desiring her and feeling ashamed of himself. The vulnerability in her gaze convinced him. "You're gorgeous." "It's me," he admitted, removing the sweatshirt he'd worn to bed. He avoided her look, bracing himself for her reaction. He heard a faint gasp, which verified his concerns. She'd seen the scars. She must feel disgusted, and perhaps even terrified. He looked away, but then felt her touch on his shoulder. "Come to bed, Harrison," she whispered. He paused before staring at her. He saw neither fear nor pity. It was friendly and understanding. We both have demons, right? She muttered. Throwing her arms around him and placing her cheek on his scarred chest, she whispered, I don't care what's on the outside. Harrison swallowed hard, sensing her words as much as hearing them slowly. He allowed himself to believe them. He took her back to bed, where his hands, lips, and eyes revealed what he had previously only fantasized. The next few days were spent in calm fellowship. They worked together on small jobs about the cabin, moving from one shore to another when the autumn air turned cold. Harrison began to look forward to these occasions, finding comfort in her presence. She wasn't intrusive, and she didn't press him to say things he didn't want to say. But there were brief moments when their gazes met, and everything felt normal. One afternoon, they decided to go for a walk around the neighboring lake. The sun shone brightly, the sky was pure blue, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. They walked down a dirt road, the sound of their feet crunching on the leaves beneath him breaking the silence. They didn't need to communicate. Satisfied to enjoy the silence of the woodland and the calm of the moment, Whitney paused for a while, gazing out at the lake, the water sparkling in the sunlight. I didn't believe I'd ever discover a location like this, she admitted gently, almost to herself. Harrison, standing next to her, nodded. I get what you mean. It's difficult to describe. It's as if the world outside does not exist here. As if we were in our own little planet. She softened her expression as she turned to face him. Yeah. It's our own little world, she agreed. As the day progressed, they returned to the cabin and spent the evening together in quiet. Dinner was simple again. But that didn't matter. Harrison experienced something he had not felt in years. A link to someone. Someone who was only interested in him as a man. Scars and all. Later that evening, they sat on the porch and watched the stars. Do you ever ponder about the future? Whitney inquired, staring at Harrison. Harrison paused, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I used to. A long time back, and now? She inquired, her voice quiet. Now I just take it one day at a time, he remarked, his tone reflective. But maybe it is enough. Whitney grinned, her eyes lingering on him. Perhaps it is. The stillness between them was comfortable and full of understanding. And, for the first time in a long time, Harrison allowed himself to imagine that, just maybe, he could have something more than solitude, something other than the peaceful, lonely life he had created for himself. With Whitney beside him, there was the prospect of a new type of future, one in which they didn't have to talk all the time and could simply exist together. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.